Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our Hangout here. We're so glad that you are able to join us for part 2 of Schools That Can's webinar series focused on connecting education to employment with our valued partner, Breaker. Last week in part 1, we had a conversation with Juliette LaMontagne, Senior TED Fellow and founder of Breaker, and Tony Wagner, best-selling author, most recently of Most Likely to Succeed, and also the expert in residence at Harvard University's Innovation Lab. In that conversation, Tony emphasized the need for schools to engage their communities in conversations about the competencies that we're really trying to develop in our students, and the importance of building crucial skills through rich and challenging content. Unfortunately, what we measure across our schools today doesn't exclusively reflect what matters, and it's schools' responsibility to help sort of enrich those opportunities. He also started sharing some strategies about how to do this kind of work. For instance, he suggested facilitating focus groups with your school and your community, as well as local business and community members, to try to identify and define these competencies. One way you can do this is by hosting a video and having a discussion about that. One tool you could use is Most Likely to Succeed, the documentary that they recently published, focused on the book that he also published. I also want to shout out Holy Family Academy in Pittsburgh, who is hosting a faculty-wide screening of this webinar series and using it as a way to start that kind of discussion. Hi, Holy Family. He also suggested involving students in their learning, share the standards with them, talk about expectations with them, give them opportunities to reflect on how they've developed competencies, give them opportunities to present and defend their learning as opposed to just turn work in. And for teachers, give them time to work collaboratively together to look at student work and think about authentic assessment, building portfolios for students so we're not just looking at did they get it right, but what competencies are they building. We also talked about being creative with your time. Juliette suggested maybe using your orientation week at the beginning of the year as an opportunity to do something out of the box, like a design thinking challenge. And then finally, we talked about some of the challenges in measuring this kind of learning. And Juliette shared early ideas about how Breaker is tackling this very difficult but critically important issue. Today you'll have the chance to dig into a little more of the details about how to actually do this work in your schools and communities. Juliette is with us again, and we'll talk about the design challenge that Breaker facilitated in Portland, Oregon this summer, highlighting what was the focus, how did they choose that, what were the goals, what did students gain, and how do they know. We'll also have the chance to hear from Gina Condon, who's the president and co-founder of the Construct Foundation. Gina has an extensive background in child development, education, design, and entrepreneurship, and she's been a powerful connector for Breaker in creating critical local partnerships that ensured the success of this citywide challenge. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera over to these lovely ladies to talk you through the experience that they've facilitated these past 2 summers in Portland, Oregon. As a reminder also, if you have any questions, please email them directly to me at clamb@schoolsthatcan.org. We cannot see the comments in the YouTube section. That was the whole technical issue last year. So please email them to me, and I'm going to turn it over to you ladies now.
Thanks so much, Casey. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so pleased to be here today with Gina Condon. As you will remember from last week, we had a conversation with Tony Wagner. It was, I hope, informal. We're going to take an opportunity to explore the work of the Construct Foundation, the work of Breaker, and the way that we have partnered and collaboratively built these design challenges in Portland, Oregon. So welcome. And let me give you just a little bit of a sense of Gina and what a visionary she is. First, it's interesting that last week's conversation was with Tony because, in fact, it was Tony who introduced me to Gina. Do you remember that, Gina?
Yes, Tony's a big inspiration for me in starting the foundation.
Yeah. So say more about that.
Well, when I was stepping back and looking at what was missing in schools, just that notion that in the last 100 years, really, the system for educating our kids hasn't changed much, but the world, of course, has changed so much around us, and so when I read his book and creating innovators and really thinking about the skill sets, the skills that are needed in this fast-paced economy as we look to prepare kids, so just deciding that was the space we wanted to work in was helping to support innovation in education, creating space for innovators like yourself to build new models. And so, yeah, his work has been inspiring.
So we should say that the Construct Foundation has only been in operation for, 2 years?
2013, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's relatively new.
Yep.
And so that thinking, Tony's thinking, and other education influencers helped you form your mission, and
right.
You reached out to Tony, I think, about some kind of a speaking engagement.
Right.
He wasn't available and recommended me, and you and I connected, and we've been in conversation ever since.
Right.
I think in large part because we understand each other so well, and we have a shared vision. So you're approaching it from the foundation side, I'm approaching it from the programming side. But it is very much about preparing kids for the new economy, preparing kids to graduate equipped for not necessarily college, but for the needs of the new economy, whatever that may be. Right. And so I'd love you to talk a little bit about your experience in the Portland State Impact Entrepreneurship Program.
Well, when I was thinking about forming the foundation, I wanted to go back and do some professional development for myself. I'd gone to graduate school, 20 years ago, was considering an MBA, did a lot of research, and what kept coming up was impact entrepreneurs and sort of being a change maker and entrepreneurship using business for social good. And lo and behold, it was really quite random that I found out Portland State here has this leading program recognized, nationally or internationally. So it was great. I met the professor and I spent a year. They offer a certificate course on the business of social innovation where you start. The first course is actually designed for social innovation, so I got to do live webinars with folks from IDEO and practice design for creating a new social model. And the idea being that, we don't have a large budget at Construct, and so what could we do with, with the budget that we have and try to design something new and different that could still have a great impact. And, when we think about, the impact, it's all about getting this in front of more kids and more teachers, the work that we do. So yeah.
So I know a lot of educators who kind of bristle at the idea of entrepreneurship and capitalism and what are you trying to train them to do? Talk to me about why you believe entrepreneurship is such an important, or entrepreneurialism is such an important component in your theory of change.
Okay. Well, when you listen to Tony Wagner last week and you have the discussion of the skills that are so critical as our kids enter the new economy, we think about empathy and collaboration and creativity, critical thinking. All of those skills are really the skills of problem solving. And entrepreneurship, innovation is all about problem solving. And when you add the social factor, it's bringing together, it's working collaboratively across disciplines to solve the problems, very long-standing problems. And our kids are going to inherit these problems to a large extent that are compounded since when we were growing up. And so you think of social innovation and the tools that go along with social innovation as just really powerful tools for making a change, for making the world a better place, and for being equipped with the tools to make the changes that you see are needed. So the founder of Impact Entrepreneurs at PSU talks a lot about using business elements to reduce pain and suffering, to make the world a better place. And it's always separated, when you talk to the people in the social impact world, very much separated from money, right? It's about adding value to the world. It's not about raising revenue or growing income.
So can I answer my own question from my point of view?
Absolutely.
Or from Breaker's point of view? So we believe that design is a process for learning. And so we bring these teams of young people together to answer a challenge with a product or service design. And that product or service must meet these three criteria. They are feasibility, can I build it with available resources? Desirability, does it meet a real human need? And viability, is it commercially viable? And people always ask, educators always push back and say, well, why does it matter if it's commercially viable? Why does it matter if someone will buy the thing? If it's a really important solution that's going to solve the problem. And, you know, it's an interesting question because for us, what we are trying to do is get kids to think of themselves as agents of change. And in the design process, in the design thinking process, as I've seen it executed in classrooms continually, it becomes a creative exercise. And while, yes, the process is intensely creative, it's more than that. It's about agency. And so when you frame it up as feasibility, desirability, and viability, it kind of flips that switch from being a creative exercise, so the flying car or the 25th hour in the day, these kinds of completely unrealistic creative solutions that kids and teachers come up with, to being those that actually work within the constraints of the real world, of the marketplace. And when you see a kid unlock that insight, like, wow, not only can I come up with a creative solution, but one that can live, that someone's willing to pay for, that has that much value in the world, it changes their worldview. So for us, that is the value. We work specifically with the lean, a version of the lean
Lean entrepreneurship.
The lean business model canvas. Couldn't get that out. It's a very specific template for coming up with a concise plan for bringing your idea to market.
Right. And when you add the social component to that, it's because I've used the business model canvas that you speak of, and I loved it. It was transformative for me. But it starts with impact, right? For the social model, right? It's like we're going to build something, but what is your long term? What's your North Star, right? The impact that you want to have in the world, and then all that you just said about giving the tools to decide and realizing that you can do that, be that change agent.
So perfect segue for us to talk about our relationship specifically, which is funder or donor, recipient, right?
Yes.
So So Construct Foundation is an incubator. So this is not a lifelong relationship between Breaker and Construct. They are trying to get our organization to sustainability. And so we are all practicing what we preach. They've given us the startup funding for us to ramp up in Portland, but we have to find the sustainable business model. Even though we're a nonprofit organization, it has to be a sustainable model.
Right. Which is another key piece for social business. It's about not just going out and asking for grants. It's what is the fee for service here. But so yes, I'm excited about this. So we started the incubation idea with the foundation because we looked around and it's so hard for new models to have room to develop. And we look to partner with visionary educators like yourself, people who have come up in the classroom, who have worked in teacher development, who understand all that goes on in that world, but then have gone on and created new models for teaching and learning. But so that general person, not to no disrespect, doesn't always have a full deck of business skills, right? And so how do you connect with your customers and adjust? And the neat thing is that you're doing that work, so you're thinking about that. But what we found that has been really useful here, and the feedback I'm getting from other funders in the state, is that what we did was we brought you in and prototyped it with our stakeholders, right? That's all we did. We just get a little bit of seed funding in there, prototype it, and we will get the stakeholders around to see if that's a good fit, right? And that's the start. So we do that, and then I call that phase one. It's prototyping with our local stakeholders and then identifying sort of the measurable outcomes. What do you think you're doing that's measurable? What can we start to gather evidence on? And then I think phase two of the incubator process is where you adapt some of the features and start to align with our stakeholders and align with the other education initiatives that are on the ground. So finding a place where your program becomes a piece in the larger puzzle, And so you may have to do some adapting to your product. So, we've got to run it again, the second challenge this summer, where we adapted it, I think, for high school, which was really powerful for our stakeholders. And I'll just finish with this, and then we'll get you to talk about it a little bit. But the final phase is, like you said, it's building a diverse funding model. But to do that, I think we'll engage with the larger education foundations. I'm talking to them all the time to see what would Breaker need to look like for you to want to fund these guys. Okay, so that gives us our our end game, right? And so we're not saying we're definitely going to go for Gates money, but it's nice to know, right? And then as you're building this fundable model along the way, right? So there's the large foundations, there's the business stakeholders who want to donate and give back to education, but how do they do that? And then there's private donors, and of course there's fee for service. And aligning with other nonprofits who have fundraising capacity, like Ecosystem. So that's what we're looking at this year. The idea being that after we finish phase 3 with Breaker, they will either be on a path, have a plausible path to get larger foundation money, or they will have enough sustainable plan to continue running so that the program's expanding here in Oregon. And that's what we're excited about. So yeah, I'm curious what you think.
Gina, can I actually jump in with a quick question?
Please.
I love the idea of doing sort of a smaller prototype with the key stakeholders locally to make sure it works. And I think it'd be helpful to hear sort of who were those local stakeholders that you had at the table, and how did you identify that they needed to be there?
Well, the whole time. So this is kind of one of those things that I'm doing all the time that I don't. It's hard to to teach it, right? Because I do it in my sleep. But continuously talking to other people who are in the space. So, I realized early on, and Juliette talks about it, just how difficult it can be to get into public schools, right? Because of the the workload that teachers are under, and administration. I mean, it's very difficult. And so I started. I wanted to work with, so we partner with other education partners like College Possible, who have already created this infrastructure. So those pathways in are super, super important, right? And so when you say the stakeholders, it was we peppered it. I mean, the first future of stuff, we had academics, we had professors of education, we had teachers from our a Title I pre-K 8 school who I'm involved with.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Gina?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the people listening really have a clear sense of what the model is. So in order to illustrate your point about how we engage stakeholders, let me kind of explain the way it works.
Great.
So we choose a challenge that feels like an open opportunity space locally, which is to say there's an opportunity for kids to examine a local problem, a systems problem, and come up with business ideas out of it. Like, it's an open opportunity space, and there are available sources of field research for them people that they can go and talk to. So the first opportunity space we identified in Portland was manufacturing. Huge maker movement, and a lot of very large manufacturers as well, not to mention Nike. So we said, well, let's investigate making and manufacturing, and let's challenge kids to come up with solutions that will add value for the resurgence of making in America. Mm-hmm. So that was their kind of big challenge. Within that, they had to go out and investigate the toolers, the pattern makers, the sourcing materials, the designers, the actual large and small, right?
You had a nice you had a technology manufacturer in there.
Yeah, as well as like a leather, a cobbler, and a leather shop, and I don't know, we had like 25 different sites that students looked at and figured out what opportunities there were to design more specifically around the problems that they observed out there. So that's part of the ecosystem. So wait, let me back up a little bit. So there were what we call the project visionaries, and those are the folks who pose the challenge for the students. So we're reaching out to thought leaders, cutting-edge entrepreneurs in that space, and having them come and talk to the kids, give them inspirational talks that say, look, this is the work that I do to answer this problem, but there's still a lot of problems to be solved in this space. So now you go and investigate and learn more. So that begins, and you can see that that's like 2 or 3 community leaders. And then they go out and research, and they're talking to makers, manufacturers, shop owners, managers, whomever. And then throughout the process of their own design process of solving that problem, they're getting advice from local entrepreneurs. We work with a local business incubator called the Portland Incubator Experiment. We work with local designers. There's a design firm called Ziba that we worked with, and Context Partners, another group of designers. So they're getting process mentorship from these folks, and they're getting content expertise. And that's a huge number of people. And interestingly, we're not asking them for money. This is not a relationship where money is exchanged. We're asking them for their knowledge and expertise. We're really leveraging the assets of the community, thinking differently about human capital, because we should be engaging with the experts around the content, and the teachers, I believe, need to become the experts in process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you did a brilliant job with Breaker with making that formula very workable for business. I've helped you set up 2 ecosystems. I think I did a lot of it really with the Future of Food. You did the Future of Stuff. But I mean, people just love the opportunity. Business in Portland, and I imagine across the country, is very much wanting to support education. They just don't. There's just the access is very difficult, and so Breaker's done a very nice job of building those, 2 or 3 options to engage. And you never get anybody who says no because it's, oh, you don't want us to write you a check. You just want us to come in and talk about what we do. That's great. But you curate it so beautifully that there's this continuous and multi-tiered learning process going on, which is great. It's a great model.
And when you say, and when Gina says that she helped, I just want to kind of break that down a little bit, because I think all schools should be thinking about the relationships they have with foundations differently. It's not just a funding relationship. The value that Construct has provided is so much more than just the financial support. The reason that we are the sustainable model that we are is that Construct has gone out and formed relationships with partner organizations with whom we work to provide our services. So the schools, or the summer programs, or the colleges and universities where we're training teachers, the faculty members, we're doing corporate trainings in some cases. Corporates are coming and sitting in on our professional development workshops. That's because foundations are uniquely poised to be that connector. They know everybody. That's kind of what they do, right? They're connectors. So I would encourage folks out there to think about the relationships that they have with local foundations and how to use those connections to your advantage in doing this project work that really extends across the community.
That's great.
Can I ask, sorry, one more question on that, and then I know getting into sort of the meat of what this looked like and what the experience was, I think will be an exciting component for a lot of the educators out there. But just curious, Juliette, I know you live and work in New York City, which is a very different sort of context than Portland, Oregon. So are you seeing that kind of, those kinds of connectors who are willing to create that ecosystem to support this in the larger cities as well?
That's a great question. I would say in our experience, New York has been surprisingly difficult in some ways, at least on the foundation side, because there's so much competition to work with different foundations. Partnerships, not a problem at all. We have rich partnerships here in New York with designers and entrepreneurs and so forth. But on the funding side, it has been more challenging. Portland is kind of the perfect city, and there's so many others. You know, it's like there's a critical mass of creative intellectuals who are interested and understand the fusion of design and entrepreneurship and why it's so critical that kids be thinking in this way from the youngest years all the way through college and beyond. Mm-hmm. I mean, corporations are pivoting their whole strategy around how can we be more human-centered and more design-centric. It shouldn't surprise us that kids need to be thinking along these lines as well, and not because we need them to take jobs in those corporations, but because we need them to be agents of change.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Do you want to do the next question? Well,
you have some questions for me? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I do. In thinking about maybe the next level for us out here in Portland, and this is good for the teacher audience, but when you do a 3-day professional development, the next steps for, just adding sort of like a toolkit, what would you envision in a toolkit for teachers or an online community support, to scaffold sort of to bring it back to work, back to the school communities?
Yeah. So a toolkit is just part of a larger strategy that we're working on in Portland, and I'd love to just take a minute to explain what that is. So it's a series of workshops for educators beginning in February, and then a train the trainer in April, kind of a deeper look at assessment and methods. And then that cohort will lead summer challenges for students. So in a sense, the teacher's chance to apply their learnings over the summer becomes their own professional development, at which time they'll receive a seed grant to go back to their schools the following September and implement either that challenge, the very challenge they ran over the summer, or perhaps some other version or more incremental application of the work. So that's the way we're kind of ramping it up. And of course, when you begin building cohorts of this kind, you need all the services and the content curation, the digital tools, particularly our assessment tools, our new assessment tools, which I talked a little bit about in the previous webinar, to support those teachers with the work and to remain connected as they prototype, test, and learn together in the following year.
How about can you speak to a little bit when maybe looking at some of the Breaker teacher alum and dealing with administrators, and it can be difficult, right, to get administrator buy-in, and have you seen any success, or do you have insight into how the teacher alums have overcome some of those challenges with their administrators?
I think teachers are classic at like closing the door, and their room is their domain, and they do whatever the heck they want. I mean, I think that happens a lot. But what happens also is that teachers get frustrated that the good work that's happening behind that closed door isn't celebrated and capitalized on across the community, and that's a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are teachers who are doing the work behind the closed door, and there are teachers who are fully supported by their administrators and are taking this work back to their own staff to do a training themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just going to say that for an example, one of the schools we work with in New York City, Stevenson School, it's an independent school serving students who have had emotional or learning challenges, but they're doing really amazing work with their kids. I think they had 1 or 2 teachers who did a breakaway workshop with you guys, and they're now sort of integrating it across their whole school. They've done some PD work with the other teachers and are integrating this with their students. So I think something that we've seen is, to your point of people need to see what's behind that closed door, because if you get the early adopters and they can show how powerful this kind of teaching and learning can be, then it starts to build a movement across the school and sort of transform the way that all of the students are accessing learning.
And we absolutely love it when we hear stories about teachers who go back and, one, implement it in some small incremental way in their curriculum, but even better when they do a whole challenge, even better if they take like a week or 2 to do it or more, or some kind of deep immersive chunk of time as opposed to in dribs and drabs. But what's really exciting is teachers are forming their own design teams. So with the proper leadership, teachers are coming together to solve their own school-wide problems, systems problems, and to rapid prototype and test and learn together about whatever issues are coming up.
Yeah. That stickiness. I'm really excited to see what this cohort, as you're talking about, bringing the teachers, giving them sort of seed capital to go into the summer and do it, because, like you said, opening the door, but the pitches, right? The culmination at the end of of a challenge is really where so many people just get hooked, like the depth of the learning that goes on for these kids. So I think that's the feedback that I'm remembering now from teachers who have taken it. It's one, it's that deep learning and that kids are able to, you know, speak of the process they've gone through, but also the grit, like the what is it called when you're driving yourself, right? They just want, their intrinsic motivation is so rich, right? The kids are just coming at it every day with a new approach that teachers get blown away, you know?
Yeah, and I should also mention that, because I kind of skipped over it when I talked about the challenge structure. Authentic audience. I can't say enough how valuable that idea of having an authentic audience, that you're designing this business model pitch for an audience, potentially of investors, maybe not real investors in the room, but the kids get up and have to present that business pitch before an audience. Mm-hmm. And that's a really important public display of, I mean, the pitch itself synthesizes all of the learnings from those that 2-week intensive, or however long the challenge might have been. But it's also, of course, their opportunity to present a persuasive argument. So that's a really important component, and we have built it into that flow that I described to you as the February and then the advanced training in April. We have strategically linked up with a Portland-based conference called Design Week Portland. So this is a celebration of designers locally, and we are trying to insert the education thread, the discussion where education and where educators and designers cross, and to have the kids come and celebrate the work from the previous year, give their business pitches, but also present the call to action with our visionaries, who will then tee up for the coming summer challenge. So that's a strategic play in April during the advanced training in conjunction with Design Week Portland. So again, like, I'm just trying to paint a portrait of how we're thinking across the city and how to leverage its assets. Like, Design Week Portland is a huge asset to the education community. So there should be an education thread, and there should be a way to bring them into the learning experience, mm-hmm. and into conversation with schools.
And then another interesting partnership for us is the partnership with EcoTrust, which is a large nonprofit that focuses on social entrepreneurship, but focuses on solving regional issues around forestry and food. They're looking at sustainable building. So these issues that are very big, and they are very deep-pocketed. They have access to many deep donors. And so by just sort of getting them exposed to the future of food this summer, we had a woman who's the vice president there come out as a visionary, and there just was such synergy. I was recently back at EcoTrust asking if they would take an annual role with us to do something really simple, which is just frame a challenge for us, a regional challenge that affects all of us, and then just do some social media and marketing for us, and so that we're basically driving new people to the initiative, so they learn about what this teaching and learning model is. And the woman, the vice president who spoke, said she was so touched by the experience with the kids, the Breakers, more so than she thought it would be. And so, you know, she's got bringing together her team, and these guys are a think tank. They're very high level, and they're trying to figure out how can we take on a new initiative. So we make it small for them, right? A little bite-sized thing, like shape a challenge. We'll take it from there. You know, put your name on it. Just partner with us. And so, you know, it takes time to negotiate those relationships, but the desire is there. So you have to figure out just their needs and align with them. So that's what I'm working on.
Can you also just sort of share the actual logistics of, you know, what's the timeline like? I know you're mentioning this advanced training and the design week, and then the challenge happens over the summer. Sort of how do you get students involved, and then what is the commitment that they're making to participate?
Students specifically, not educators?
Well, all of them, but sort of, you know, who is receiving the training, where are the students coming from, when are they conducting this, and sort of like thinking about also, you know, if there are schools who are watching this who are interested in doing something like it, you know, when do they need to start preparing for this? When might they want to run something like this?
Yeah, we've thought really carefully about our calendaring of these workshops. February so this February is happening the 5th through the 7th, again in Portland, Oregon, at the Oregon Storyboard. That's the space that we'll be conducting the weekend workshop in, and you can register online if you're interested. The advanced training will be by application only, and so that's an April engagement that will, as I said, will be in conjunction with Design Week Portland, and we haven't released those dates yet because we don't have them. And April was chosen partly because the Design Week Portland engagement, but also because we find that that's when teachers begin teeing up for the next fall in terms of like thinking about new curricula or administrators identifying their budgets and their agendas and so forth. So spring, before you start to get into too close to summer, seems to be a great time to do some aspirational thinking about the following school year. So that's the goal, or that's the timing rather, of April. But it's really leading into the summer challenges, and that's where we get students. So the February and April are exclusively teacher trainings, or educator trainers, because it's not just teachers, it's community-based organizations as well. And then the summer, these are 2-week student challenges. And the students come from our partner organizations. So College Possible, you've heard us mention a couple of times. We're working with a couple of other sites and trying to lock in. But in the past, we've also just done open calls where we just say, we're running a challenge, it's open to anyone between the ages of 14 and 26. So there may, in fact, be one challenge next summer, or this coming summer, that is an open call in that way. But it's nice for us to work with a partner organization like College Possible that has already identified those kids.
Right. We're talking to Portland Community College as well, right? Monday morning we have a meeting, and they were able to come and see the project and said, you know, the Portland Community College is great, and they would like to embed it in their system. So again, that's like this process is as little steps forward into figuring out how they bring it in to their program, but we will be able to support them to get a 2-week challenge going next summer to get into, you know, as we take these steps closer to actually building the capacity for them to run them system-wide.
So the teachers have the opportunity to apply their learnings, and the students are the recipients of that gift, right? They're having this amazing learning experience as the teachers are training. And then those teachers who are already committed to schools, and will go back in the fall to those schools, will take that challenge and or their learnings back and apply them and prototype using their seed funding.
It's very exciting. And have a learner community, an online community where they can support each other, because the same issues are coming up, but some of them are forging through and solving problems around space and time and where does this fit in the curriculum. I'm excited about that.
And part of what we'll be prototyping will be not just the community platform that connects that cohort of teachers, but we need to figure out how to bring all of those stakeholders that we've been talking about this whole conversation onto a single platform. So that they can see the opportunities to work on other projects or to connect other schools to local designers, entrepreneurs, and others.
Right, and when we announce in April, when April Design Week Portland becomes our sort of anchoring annual event, and then we launch a challenge, I mean, there will be an open invite, right? Once the online services are built out, there'll be opportunities to access and just try it. Like, you never know. Teachers might just want to say, we're going to try to do this challenge, and then stay in touch with us, and then take your PD next year, or go deeper. So that's, I'm really excited to start seeing that kind of expansion happen.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's the intention of Design Week Portland, is that challenge goes out not just to that small cohort and those students who've applied to get into the summer programs, but yeah, the idea is that's a call to action citywide. This year's Breaker Challenge is blah, 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 and I'm not sure if I should say what we're thinking about because it's not definite, but each year a different challenge. And yes, there'll be an opportunity to work with us over the summer, but your teacher can just as well lead the challenge in his or her school.
Mm-hmm. And then Juliette, just to sort of bring back an important conversation that we had last week about how do you then measure the outcomes of this, and I know, Gina, you were saying that that's a critical element in being able to make sure that this is sustainable over time. So what were the student outcomes, and how do you know this was a success?
Is that a question for me, or
either of you? I know you spoke a little bit, I don't know if you used the competency maps that you talked about during the summer, or
we did.
I know you have some charts on the website, the Future of Food website, but yeah, if you could just talk to some of that.
Well, yeah, so we started out using portfolio-based assessment, so having students collect artifacts, evidence of their learnings across 10 21st century skills. Now, that's a lot of artifacts, and those are a lot of skills to be assessing, and it wasn't user-friendly, let's put it that way. It was not entirely a user-friendly experience for students, and because it's such an experiential learning program, they weren't, it just was cumbersome to try to collect every artifact and upload it to your portfolio. It became an afterthought. So we realized we needed a more seamless way for them to collect evidence of their learning. And I should back up a bit and say we have a set of rubrics that correspond to all those 21st century skills, so they know on a continuum what growth looks like over time and what the benchmarks are and so forth. And they're trained with that conceptual framework going in. And then it's on them, the burden's on them to collect evidence, whether it's a scrap of notes they took in the field, or a broken glass that represents a moment of insight, or whatever. It could literally be any form of video, artifact, notes, photographs, audio, anything. And we would say, just dump it in your folder, just dump it in there. You can organize and curate it later. But as I said, it was cumbersome. So our learnings were this. I'll try to keep it short. I could go on and on and on and on about assessment. I have a lot of ideas about this. We tried to make it more mobile. We decided ultimately that, yes, we're teaching all 21st century skill. There's no doubt about that. But let's stop for a moment and ask ourselves, well, what's most important post-high school? Like, what is the job market? What is the new economy? What are employers telling us? Or what does entrepreneurship demand? And the most critical skills are communication, collaboration, and creativity. And critical thinking. Did I say critical thinking? Communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. So we're like, okay, yes, we do all the other things. Let's just focus on these and develop really crisp language that makes it more user-friendly and make the tool more user-friendly. So we did that by doing away with the portfolio system, and instead we have, it looks kind of like a target. I should have it for you to show.
It's on the website, so people.
Thank you. All it really is, it's a way of thinking about a rubric visually. It's a visually succinct rubric, and because it's digital, well, it's not quite digital, we're using a paper prototype, but it will soon be digital. You can interact with it and see growth over time visually. So the color literally expands as your competencies develop. And so there's a wheel for communication, collaboration, communication, and we can correlate the growth of those skills to the creative output, being the pitch, the business solution that they come up with. So how well did you communicate and collaborate with your team? And as a result, what kind of creative output did you have? Because then we can design interventions that help you collaborate, communicate, to get to a better, more creative output.
That's great. I know we have 2 minutes left. I want to make just a quick announcement or two before we wrap up. But Gina or Juliette, do you have any sort of last-minute thoughts or takeaways before we wrap up?
Go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add, so that's down the measurement and very granular, but I also think we look at, my board is very excited about sort of the transformational experiences that we create through a Breaker project, and just counting those first-time touches. You know, how many businesses got involved for the first time with students who haven't had a chance to do that? How many, you know, and then the kids, how many kids have actually touched design thinking for the first time, you know, pitched for the first time, and starting to just capture that. And as we go broader in with Design Week Portland, trying to capture some of those numbers. Who's touching this project, you know?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for participating. We will have the recording of this webinar as well as the first one posted probably within minutes after we wrap up here. Just a few upcoming events that might be relevant for those of you who are with us. First, on November 14th in New York, Schools That Can is hosting our 3rd annual E2E, or Connecting Education to Employment Symposium, where we'll similarly be bringing together sort of diverse stakeholders, K-12, higher ed, industry, innovators, to talk through how can we help schools develop solutions to challenges that they're facing around trying to build these kinds of competencies with students. So if you're in the area, then email me and I can send you the registration link for that. Also, Breaker is recruiting schools nationwide to be partners and run challenges in their cities. So if you're interested in learning more, participating in one of those challenges, or even creating the ecosystem to make that happen, then send an email to info@breaker.org, and we will continue to share sort of information about Breaker opportunities and their breakaway workshops for teachers and whatnot as we hear them from you guys. So thank you, everybody. Another great conversation. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Casey.
That was great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gina.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.